You're listening to Stellar Success, Leveling Up for Medical Pros with Dr. Tudor Francu. Join us as we explore how medical professionals can achieve stellar success in all areas of life. It's time to level up.
Hi, everyone. Stellar Success Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tudor Francu, and I have a pleasure to have a great guest, somebody who is very special, does very special things, and it's a little bit different than what kind of guests we have on the podcast. Dr. John Degarmo, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Sure. Dr. Degarmo, we're a stellar success. We're stellar and we're success. What do you think would be the best characterization of your success in your view?
Well, my job is a little bit different. I work with foster parents, child welfare agencies, fighting human trafficking, and legislators. So my, I guess, success for me would be bringing healing to children in crisis and finding opportunities for people to help these children who are in crisis.
That's great. That's a great success story. And, I want to kind of detail a little bit for our audience. What was your path to where you are right now? How did you start? How did you come about doing this, what you're doing right now?
Well, thanks for asking. So it really goes back to the death of my first child. My wife's from Australia. We lived there for several years. And our first child died of a condition called anencephaly, or some pronounce it anencephaly. It's a condition where the brain or skull doesn't truly form. And my wife was in labor for 92 hours. And at that time, I turned my back on a lot of things in my life. And then we moved back to the United States, and I was teaching in a rural high school setting in Georgia, middle Georgia, very, very rural, filled with a lot of generational poverty, generational apathy. And I had a lot of kids coming through my classroom who had issues of attendance and behavior and academics. And I kept asking myself, what is this? What's going on? And then I met a lot of their birth parents, and I recognized, aha, it starts in the home. And at that time, I had a student who was a senior in high school who was pregnant with triplets. And I recognized that neither her nor the father was in any shape whatsoever to care for the children. And at that same time was also the largest human sex trafficking ring happening in the United States at that time, by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Malachi York, who brought over 1,000 children over state lines to have sex with him. And I had a lot of those kids in my classroom. So, I went to my wife and said, hey, we lost our first child. We now have 3 healthy ones, but I've got these kids in my classroom who are really, really in crisis. And they need a place to stay. So that led to my wife and I becoming foster parents over 60 plus kids. I got my doctorate centered around that. And now I travel the globe trying to reform the foster care system and help those who are trying to help children.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm really impressed, and I think the audience would have a great opportunity to kind of have an insight on what it is for a successful person like you to go into a field like this. It's something that not a lot of people are doing, and not a lot of people are thinking about.
Right.
Especially in healthcare field. And I want to kind of go deeper into your motivation and your reasons for doing this, because the fact that something happened to your kid initially, it's a great way to start. But what keeps you going to do this over and over again and help so many people?
Sure. Thanks for asking. So we had a child in our house who was with us for about 2 years. And she came from a horrific environment, and we were in the process of adopting her. And then I got a phone call one day, actually right before Christmas, saying that she was going to go live with her aunt and uncle in a different state, whom she'd only met once in her life when she was 6 months old. She was nine years of age at this point. And so she was 22 hours later, she was ripped from our house. She ended up being right by her aunt and uncle's stepson, abandoned. We finally found her 9 years later in a children's mental health hospital, and the foster care system had completely failed her. And it drives me every single day not to let that happen to any children, let alone one of my kids. Right now we are in the midst, I tell people the real pandemic right now is mental health for our children. We're in the midst of a mental health crisis since the lockdowns. 70% increase in teenage suicides, child depression's at an all-time high. So that means when you and I are having this conversation, there's a child right now who is desperately crying out for help. Yet, as you mentioned, this is not something that many people address. Before I was a foster parent, I had no clue about what was going on. I believed the myths and misconceptions surrounding foster care and child welfare, that the kids were bad kids. But that's the opposite. These are children who are victims of neglect, abuse, abandonment, and these are kids who just want to be loved by somebody. So, really that situation with the child that we were trying to adopt, that's what drives me every single day.
Yeah, that's very powerful. And I think a lot of people that are listening right now are wondering, what is that we need to know as a general public from you, especially as a specialist in this field, if someone is thinking about doing a great benefit to any kid that's left like this? What if they want to become a foster family or foster parent?
Sure, sure. Now, before I answer that, I'm going to step back a minute here and say that there are 5 million kids in the United States who experience domestic violence every day in their house. And during the lockdowns of 2020 and 2021, when we shut the schools down, what happened to those kids was what they were no longer going to school and getting their mandated report of their 2 meals a day. But most importantly, they were no longer for those 8 hours a day in school, they weren't being raped, they weren't being abused, they weren't being hurt. So what we did was we locked them in home with their abusers for 24 hours a day with no mandated reporting whatsoever. So we have a lot more victims now as a result, and that also drives me. I'll tell you this: to me, foster parenting has been the hardest thing I've ever done. Been the most rewarding thing, and every child's made me a better person in some way. But there are those myths and misconceptions about foster parenting that you've got to be married. You don't have to be. You have to have a big house. You don't have to do that. You have to be have a lot of money. You don't have to do that. You just have to have these desire to help children in crisis. And the sad truth is, there's a child in every single community. Human trafficking is skyrocketing in our nation as well. It's the #1 global business is human trafficking. And right now in the United States, the numbers are just skyrocketing up, mainly due to the open borders. And I've had many kids in my own home who have been victims of human trafficking, actually. So if you want to be a foster parent, the very first thing you need to do is you need to sit down and talk to your family about it, because it's a complete family commitment. If you're married, you have a partner, you've both got to be on board. If you have children, they've got to be on board as well, because it takes everybody to do so. And then you simply contact your local child welfare agency, whether it's a state one or maybe a private agency, and you sign up for the classes. And then I'll tell you this: your life will be completely changed. It is a very unique, I don't call it a job, I call it a lifestyle. Very different kind of lifestyle that I never even imagined. And it has completely changed my life for the better, to be sure.
Yeah, you're an amazing person for doing this. I really appreciate whatever you did so far, and I read a lot about your history and your accomplishments. And it came to my mind right now that when you said that it's probably in the United States, at least, I think it's easier to adopt a dog than go into fostering a kid. And it's not only about the legal aspects of it, and I want you to talk a little bit about that too, because I know you're involved in this, but it's the regulations, the protocols, all this nonsense, I would say, that it's a barrier for someone, even if they want to foster a kid, to get it done. And can you tell us more about what is that you're doing right now? What projects are you leading in terms of legal aspects of fostering kids?
Well, that's a great question. Since there's 50 different states in the United States, that means there's 50 different ways doing foster care. Every state does it different, and no state does it perfect by far. I'm working with a lot of legislators in DC and across the country to reform the system. As I mentioned earlier, we've got more kids in crisis, but there's not enough foster parents, and there's many reasons for that. And as a result, we hear stories about children sleeping in hotels because there's not enough homes for these children. So I'm working with legislators to try to reform the system. It shouldn't be easy to be a foster parent. I will say that, because not everybody should be a foster parent, and not everybody can be a foster parent. Everybody can help a child in some way. I truly believe that. So I'm working with legislators on how to reform the system. For example, when children age out of the foster care system, 55% will quit school, 65% will end up homeless, 75% will end up incarcerated, and the system will just start over again. So we need to look at that. We need to help those kids when they leave the foster care system, so they have a support group. We need to make sure that when the children are reunified with their homes, their birth parents, that they continue to get the support services they need. And we also need to make sure that we work on retaining our foster parents. Your average foster parent quits after about 18 months because they say this is too hard. But that's the same with caseworkers. Today's caseworkers or social workers are overworked, overwhelmed, under-resourced, under-supported, understaffed, and unpaid, and they quit as well. So we got to look at, how do we retain our caseworkers? How do we retain our foster parents? How do we provide the support services that they need to help these very, very vulnerable children?
Yeah, that's amazing. I would totally have a shout out right now for everybody that can get involved in this. It's a great cause. I think, I'm coming from a former communist country when I immigrated in the United States, and from Romania, and they had a lot of issues with kids left alone, abandoned. They didn't have enough foster parents, obviously, to take care of them, and then many ended up, like you said, in trafficking situations or abuse, neglect, and this is one subject that it's very close to my heart. So I would definitely encourage everyone to reach out to you and, get more information if they want to get involved in this. Another thing that you said, which struck me, you said that you had about 60 kids coming to your house. Is that true?
Yes, we've had as many as 11 kids in this house at the same time, including 7 in diapers at the same time, which I think should be illegal in all 50 states because that 7 in diapers is, well, it's something else, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Um, but it's because there's not enough homes. There's simply not enough homes. And I tell legislators all the time that these aren't goods and services. These are children. So there should be a sense of urgency to help these children.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I want to stop a little bit and kind of delve into the personal aspect of having a home where several babies are foster, several teenagers are foster, and you have a family of your own to take care of. What kind of rules and regulations do you have in your home personally to take care of this kind of company, I would say, because it looks like a business that you need to run.
Well, you've got to be very, very patient, very, very flexible. When these kids are coming to their home, they have issues of trust and issues of attachment. Who do they trust? Because every adult in their life has betrayed them in some way. So we've got to give them the time to learn that they can trust us. And we got to be patient, compassionate, understanding. We also have to be very, very consistent in our lifestyle. We have to have routine and structure and stability and consequences, and we have to be consistent with all of that, because if we don't have consistency, we don't have structure and stability, it falls apart pretty quickly. At the same time, as I said earlier, my own children have to be involved as well, and they very much are. I have 6 kids of my own. I've adopted 3 from the foster care system. I have 3 biological, and I need to tell you this: in my house, there's no label, there's no biological or foster adoptive. Every kid that's in my house is a member of my family, and we love them with all that we have, because that's what
amazing.
They need stability, they need structure, but they need more, and they need unconditional love more than anything else. So my own kids will take part in, maybe helping laundry and cooking and cleaning, that kind of thing, because it's pretty hard for my wife and I to do it all by ourselves, to be quite honest.
Yeah,
And we also have our own full-time jobs as well.
Right. I can only imagine. I mean, I can't imagine. That's why I want to ask you a little bit more about this. So, I'm trying to deconstruct your recipe for success in your own home and in your own profession. You must have some very clear skills and habits to deal with so many kids in your house, take care of your full-time jobs, take care of your family, and do whatever you do on the legal side of it, and speaking and TED Talks and so on and so forth. What are those skills and habits that you think got you to this point?
It's a great question. I really go back to the fact that that I have had to learn to be patient, because I'm a person who wants to just get things done now. But again, when you've got all these kids in your house, it doesn't always go as planned. It really doesn't go as planned, because there's a child melting down, a child with anger management issues, a child with sleep anxieties, eating disorders, whatever it might be. So we've got that structure, we've got that stability, but we've also got to be understanding that things are going to break down pretty quickly. And I have learned that we take it one day at a time. We take it one day at a time. And we also learned that my wife and I have, so many people tell us you can't do what you do. My wife's a doctor of nutrition, has her own practice, nutritional medicine, naturopathic medicines, and a massage therapist. And of course, I'm traveling the nation and globe. But we've had to learn to really depend upon each other and not look too far in the future. We're focused on the here and now, What does this child need today? What do I need to do as well? And also, I think that's really important for self-care. Self-care is so critical. Many foster parents experience something known as secondary traumatic stress, which I'm sure you're familiar with, compassion fatigue. I love that term, compassion fatigue exhaustion from compassion, from caring. And I've been there too. So we've got to practice self-care. We've got to place stability and structure in the household and have that consistency. And it's always learning too. Every time a child comes into my house, I'm learning something new about this child's situation, about their trauma, if you will.
You are a perfect example of someone who completely got out of his comfort zone, accomplish and take risks, and accomplish something amazing. And like Jim Rohn said, don't wish something is easier, wish you were better. And I think you have accomplished that. You became better and better every day by doing this with every kid that you got under your wings. I also have to ask you, obvious question is, financially, how do you deal with a matter like this? Because, a kid is very expensive to raise. We all know that. And there's some statistics out there that are, kind of frightening, of the amount of money that you spend, by having a kid. So how do you approach this, aspect?
Well, when it comes to kids in foster care, there is a daily per diem that you get. It depends upon the per diem depends upon the child's age and their trauma level, if you will. Now, to be sure, that per diem does not pay for everything, because when the kids come to our house, they become a member of family. So we want to make sure that they're getting that normalcy, that lifestyle normalcy. So they're in marching band, they're playing sports, they're having big birthdays because they've never had a birthday before in their life. We had a 10-year-old child who didn't know the words happy birthday because no one had ever sung it to him before, which is amazing. So we easily and quickly open up our own wallet and pay for it. But at the same time, it's also a life of sacrifices. Foster parenting is a lifestyle of sacrifices. We can't go off to the movies when we want. We can't go off to dinner we want, because we can't, because we've got these kids in crisis in our home, and we might not be able to afford it.
Yeah.
So, my wife and I have made the decision that this is our mission at this point in our life. And, hopefully we'll reap the rewards when we die. People say, how do you do it? How come you're not so tired? Well, I'm exhausted. I'm worn out. I'm really tired, but I'll just sleep when I die. And then people say, you can't do that. And my wife and I say, well, watch us. We're going to make this happen. We're going to make this happen.
That's very inspirational. And I have to ask you, regarding the financial aspect of raising such a big family, basically. Do you thought about did you think about any kind of passive income streams that you can use to fulfill this financial goals you have with them?
Yes, yes. So I am a paid professional speaker. I have an extensive online training webinar basis at many foster care agencies across the country. I'm working on my 13th book. I'm a consultant for a lot of child welfare agencies. I also work with legal firms as an expert witness. But unfortunately, that is a very grim job, because every case I review is usually about a child who's been raped or murdered or killed, which can be emotionally taxing, if you will. But there are several different streams of income, but I certainly don't do this for the money. I do it because I have a heart for kids. But at the same time, I also got to feed these children as well. So there are different avenues of income, and I've been blessed to do that. Yes. But you know what? I never planned on doing this. This was never my vision in my life whatsoever.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's a great story. Now, also, I'm trying to find out from you, when do you have time to take care of yourself? Because you have to keep up with this job. You have great responsibilities for your family right now. And how does a day in Dr. Degarmo's life look like?
Every day is different, to be sure, but it's usually getting up in the morning early, and I get up early before the kids do, and I've got that prayer time, devotion time, and then I'll get up and make the kids breakfast, and everybody goes off to school and work, etc. But the truth is, foster parents go to work to rest, because when we come home, you got children who are in crisis, suffering from trauma, filled with anxiety. So how do I find time? For me, gardening is a passion. I can go outside and escape, if you will. I love to read. I love to travel. Since my wife's from Australia, we've been able to, we met in a performing group, travel the world singing and dancing. So we've been able to visit 5 continents. And that to me is an escape, if you will, when we can make that happen, if you will. Yeah. But gardening is making sure I spend some time with my wife, and that devotion time. But there's not much time, to be honest with you. I will embrace the time when my wife and I have no children in the house. I'm a long ways from it. I've got a child who is 27, and I've got a child who's in 6th grade.
Oh, wow.
We've adopted are very, very young. So it's going to be a long haul, but it's the most rewarding thing I've ever done.
It's a great mission. Any projects or exciting things that you look forward to right now?
Yeah, I've got a book coming out next year, 2025, that is co-written with a celebrity actress. Her name is Jen Lilly. She does all these Hallmark movies, but she's also a foster and adoptive parent as well. And we worked with legislators in DC and elsewhere. We decided to write a book together, and I'm really excited about that. It's a different book. It's an actress's view and an expert's view of foster parenting, of females and males of foster parenting. It's a different kind of book. I've never done that before. That's interesting. I'm doing some exciting consulting opportunities where I'm traveling the state of Georgia, helping to set up foster parent support groups, because they've got to have that support group. The only person who understands a foster parent is another foster parent.
Yeah.
And they quit if they don't have support. So I'm doing that. And I'm also helping agencies in recruiting and working with legislators. So it's always something new, and I'm always seeking out new opportunities again to make the system a better one for children in crisis. You know, I don't stop. I don't stop.
Yeah, that's the winner's mentality, right? Don't quit. Don't ever quit.
Yes, yes. And unfortunately, I can't quit because if I do, you know, as I guess I said earlier, there's a child right now, probably a mile from you and a mile from me, who's crying out, "Someone please help me."
Yeah, exactly. Do you have any kind of, retrospectively thinking, any kind of nuggets of advice for someone who would start to foster kids?
To prepare for an incredible roller coaster of emotion. There is so much joy, there's so much grief and heartbreak. You know, when a child leaves our home, it's like losing a member of our family. It really is. And my wife and I have experienced 4 failed adoptions, which means the adoptions did not go as we had planned. And that's heartbreaking. But then there's also the joys of watching a child learn how to smile for the very, very first time. We had a child in our house who was 4 years of age, who could not speak a single word. I won't go into the trauma that she experienced, but it was absolutely horrific. And she came to our house and she couldn't say a word. She had no verbal skills whatsoever, just grunted. And watching her learn how to laugh and learn how to smile, it was so worth it. So
Yeah.
worth it. You know, at Christmas time, my house is filled with children who come back to stay with us, to visit with us. That's so rewarding. So I would say the prepare for a roller coaster of emotion, and something that's going to be completely life changing.
Yeah, very helpful advice, to put everything, in perspective. Um, one more question would be, we all know that in order to have success, you have probably any kind of failure in your life at some point.
Right.
Do you do you have any example of a thing that didn't really go your way and you learn a lot from it and you move forward?
Sure, sure. And it's not it's a tough one for me. Um, my wife and I had 11 kids in the house at that point, and I was speaking at an event in Iowa for 3 days, and my wife was called for a 12th child, and she said, I can't take 12 kids. We're not a group home. We're not a group home." And a few weeks later, our minister at church came to us and said, how about opening up a group home for kids in foster care? And we did. We opened up a residential home for boys in the foster care system that were that really couldn't thrive in a traditional household setting. These are boys who had extreme trauma, and it was going quite smoothly. And then the lockdowns of 2020 came along, and all of the rules and regulations that came along with it forced the house to close. And we had these boys who had been living in the home, and they were suddenly homeless, um, because the policies placed upon COVID. And I still feel a lot of guilt about that. There was nothing I could have done. I recognize that. Um, I mentioned earlier the girl that we tried to adopt, um, and she was removed from our home. I had a lot of guilt about that too. I thought to myself, what could I have done better? What could I have done differently? Because when we found her 9 years later, when she was 17 years of age, she had all these cuts in her hand. No one called her, no one visited her, no one had written her letters. And she thought that we'd abandoned her at Christmas. That was just the opposite. And I had a lot of guilt about that for years as well. Those are two of the most prominent ones. But you know what? I've had a lot of failures, to be sure, a lot of failures. Sometimes it doesn't work out with legislation that I would like. Um, but you know what? I learn from every failure. And I think that's what we do. We learn from our failures, and we have to reflect upon that. What did I do? How did this fail? How can we do it differently this time? What have I learned from this? And I don't want to say I like failure, but I embrace it, if that makes sense. I embrace it because it makes me stronger, and I think it drives me even further.
Yeah, that's amazing. The way the way the failures are in your field are a little bit different than any any other failures in a real life. So yeah, I definitely think that, anything that you can learn from those experiences can help you move forward with other kids. Um, how can someone get in touch with you to get your mentorship, your advice, or guidance if they want to start something like this?
Thanks for asking. Quite simply, go online, search for the Foster Care Institute, the Foster Care Institute, which I'm the founder and director of, or search for Dr. John Degarmo, foster care expert online. I'm all over social media. My emails, address is there, my phone number's there. Um, and I will very quickly make myself available to anybody who wants to learn how to help a child in crisis.
That's amazing. Dr. Degarmo, you are a hero. And your wife is a hero too. These are both of you are people that are special because it takes a lot of courage, a lot of dedication, and a lot of grinding to accomplish a project like this. Not with one, but with several kids that you have in your house. So I certainly, give you all the kudos I can. Thank you so much for being on my show, and I hope people will learn and will do something about this.
You're very kind. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much. I do want to add this. Not everybody can be a foster parent, but everybody can help in some way. And I'd be happy to help them learn how to help a child in their area.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's a wrap on Stellar Success, Leveling Up for Medical Pros with Dr. Tudor Francu. Interested in joining us? Go to stellarsuccesspodcast.com/guest to apply. Stay stellar and level up.